So like, there's this one house like in the mountains somewhere that is like in the middle of nowhere, like in a forest and stuff.
Uh-huh.
It's like pitch black because I've been driving all day because I'm like going from one state to another. I don't even know what places have whatchamacallit. I don't know what places have mountains. Colorado's have mountains. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we're like driving through the mountain range, right? And like the guy pulls over at this gas station, and it's like an old gas station, like in those like you ever seen the movie Zombie something like there's like a
No, but
it's like a
just keep
comedy kind of
going.
show. Well, the gas station's like all run down and stuff,
Yeah.
and like everything about it was just scary because like the windows were boarded up, and like well, me and this guy went in there, right? It's an old guy. Oh yeah, Zombieland, that's what it's called. Well, it's like an old, like scary kind of thing, right? And
Mm-hmm.
everything about it's just super scary. Well, the old man, um, in there, I was looking through a fridge trying to find something to drink or something to eat or something, and I would turn around, and that old man would be like, his body would be like breaking, like his bones would get bigger, and like everything about it would just get bigger, and then he would turn into a frog and chase me around until he ate me in one bite. And that was my dream.
That was like a recurring nightmare.
Yeah, for years.
That's awesome. That would be so scary.
Yeah, it was bad.
Because since you're in your dream state, you're kind of like stupid, and you're like, so you're just running from this frog dude who eats you.
Yeah, in one bite he would just go like, oh. Okay, I'll try to think of some more stories. I don't really have that many stories. Hmm. Tell a story, Ford.
mm, Here, give me a hot minute.
Okay.
Give me a sec.
Okay. Hmm. Let me think
Okay,
about. Okay, go.
uh, let's go with the well.
The what?
I looked up creepy pastas.
Creepy what?
Creepy pasta. Okay. My grandfather grew up on a chicken farm outside of Krakow, Poland. He passed away a few years ago at the age of 82. A few days before his passing on, due to an aggressive form of stomach cancer, he sat me down next to him in his old rocking chair, and he said in his familiar Polish accent, "After I took the boat to New York, I promised to leave this story behind." He didn't look up as he spoke to me. simply staring into its cup of black coffee. It's been 70 years, and I must tell someone before I meet God. I was born in a small, quaint, empty town, which despite the Nazi occupation still functioned. We lived in the two-bedroom farmhouse. My father, my mother, and my brothers, Michael and Iger. I'm sorry you never got to meet any of them. Anyway, Michael and Iger were twins, identical twins actually, and we had heard rumors of the Nazis' fascination with identical twins. This forced us, and we were already lived in secluded part of the countryside, in the last occupied house in the town, to be even more reserved. In order not to go into the occupied towns, we basically ate only chicken and eggs for every meal, and whatever Mama could gather from the garden. It was lonely, but we survived. The only two things which were really hard on me were the fact I had to sleep in the basement. Due to Michael and Iger being toddlers, they required my father and mother's attention. The basement was cold with only a small window and moonlight, and was the only light I got. Because of this, I always delayed going down there until I was absolutely exhausted, so I wouldn't have to lie there awake. On the nights that I couldn't manage to sleep, I would look out the window, which gave me a small view of the garden and the large abandoned water well. This was my daily activity throughout those lone war-torn days. In general, it was boring and uneventful, but occasionally I would catch a glimpse of a family, or even just a man, or even two lovers sneaking their way through our garden up to our front door. They always looked rushed and frightened, and sometimes wore tattered uniforms. What would follow were horrible sounds of banging and pleading for whoever lived here to open up, followed by an urgent argument between my father and mother over whether we should let them in. He moved in the chair to adjust himself. You see, son, we didn't know it. Well, at least I didn't, that we lived fairly close to the Auschwitz concentration camp, and those were escapees. Oof.
Want me to tell a story? I looked one up.
Yeah.
Alright. There was a young girl kidnapped in the middle of the day on a neighborhood street in Springfield, Missouri. I hope it's Missouri. Someone in the street witnessed the event and tried chasing the car on foot to at least get the plate number and call the police. They sent out an Amber Alert after a few hours, identified the owner of the vehicle and his residence, but by the time they got to his house, they found her undressed body in a plastic tub in his basement, and she had been raped and shot dead. The most messed up thing that this guy was a middle Most messed up thing was that this guy was a middle school coach and he had child pornography in his house, as well as photos of young girls from his middle school. We found out at my Catholic high school that the murderer was the son of our theology teacher. Our teacher left school for over a week, I'm sure trying to fathom how his own son could commit such a heinous crime. The murderer was sentenced to death this year for the family of the girl. Haley Owens, her family, as well as the family of the murderer, lobbied to change Amber Alert laws so they can be issued faster after a kidnapping is reported. That's scary. Oh yeah, I got know. A guy I know is a boat mechanic. So one Saturday he's on his own doing some work on a boat, and suddenly he comes to and he's on the ground. He knew there was water under the boat he'd been working on, so he assumes he's been electrocuted, and he's vaguely aware of someone behind him. So he starts yelling, "Help, help, I've been electrocuted." He hears whoever is behind him leave. He keeps yelling, and eventually a guy in a neighboring business hears him and comes to his aid. When he's at the hospital, he finds out he wasn't electrocuted. Someone had hit him in the back of the head with his own mallet. Nothing was stolen from the shop. Meaning someone who was never caught was just walking by and spontaneously decided to hit him on the back of the head for no reason. That one's not scary. There was a segment in the news not too long ago about a girl who walked home late at night from a nightclub, I do believe, and was raped 3 times by 3 different people at 3 different points along the way. They have a CCTV of her between each of these points.
How unlucky do you have to be?
Listen to this one. A woman was abducted and raped by two men and then stabbed over 30 times. Her neck muscle completely removed, her guts spilling out. She crawled to the hospital with her head almost detached and survived. She wrote a book and now is a motivational speaker with two kids despite the fact that she was disemboweled. What the?
What?
Owen was abducted and raped by two people, right? And is stabbed over 30 times.
And then had her guts pulled out and her neck muscles cut.
Yeah, and her head was almost detached. She survived it.
And then some people can't survive like falling down the stairs. What the heck?
Oh, here's a long one. Back in the 90s, my mom was on the highway heading home from a friend's house late at night. She was driving a really nice Thunderbird. After a while, this big white van drove next to her, and the driver started performing some very rude gestures and being young and dumb. My mom, and being young and dumb, my mom reciprocated the gestures. Then the dude pulled up a big Bowie knife to the window. My mom started panicking and sped up to get away from the van. To get away, and the van was following right along. Then the guy tried to run her off the road. Keep in mind, they're probably going about 100 miles per hour. She's she gets on the exit to get home, and he's still following her. When she does get back to her house, which she shared with my grandparents, she pulled into the driveway, honking the horn and screaming, trying to wake someone up. The man pulls into the driveway just as my grandfather comes out in his underwear with a gun. The dude got scared and drove off. My mom wouldn't leave her house for a month except for school, but never at night. That's scary.
Ooh.
Oh, here's a really long one. You ready for this one? These are all real too. I was driving home from work one night around 9 p.m. midweek, so the roads were quiet. As I was driving downhill, I heard a sound that was like a jet engine roaring behind me. The next thing I know, a car goes flying past me going twice the speed limit. It looked like a fairly old, crappy car. The car started to get the speed wobbles, and then one of the tires came flying off and rolled at speeds downhill whilst the car spun out and crashed. I stopped my car to make sure whoever inside was okay. A guy got out of the car and looked over at me, then started moving extremely quickly towards me. I don't know why, but I hit my internal locks on the car, which was fortunate because no more than 2 seconds later, the guy started grabbing at the driver's side door and smashing on my windscreen with his fist, trying to get in. I'll never forget the crazy look he had in his eyes. I put my foot down on the accelerator and drove off back home. I decided to swap cars once I got home and drove back to see what was going on. I saw two fire trucks and about four police close to where the incident happened. When I got back to the crash site, the guy was no longer there, so I decided to head home. The next day at work, I was online bored reading the news when I saw an article that shocked me. The article was about a guy who had been in a police chase for 1 hour and the police stopped chasing him because it was becoming too dangerous. Turns out the guy was high on meth, had stolen a car hours, an hour's drive away. Stolen a car an hour's drive away, and he had been in hot pursuit since. After crashing the car, the guy apparently crossed to the other side of the road and hailed the first car that appeared, which was a taxi. He got into the taxi and stole it. In the process, he pushed the driver out of the driver's side door, and the driver got stuck and dragged at speeds. The driver died from the incident. I called the police and had a detective assigned to me. He fingerprint checked my car and got a statement. I had to testify in the Supreme Court as a key witness in a murder trial. The guy got 30 years, and they told me that my testimony was one of the main factors in convicting him. I often think back to that night. I wonder if I hadn't locked my doors, would I have been the one who got murdered? Bum bum. There's a person in Japan to this day who is a cannibal and eats people, or he used to eat people, and he's not medicated, and he's not monitored at all. Oh, I got it.
Nice.
Not the scariest thing that I know about, but the scariest thing that ever happened to me. I worked at a pretty well-known record store in Los Angeles in the 90s. A guy in his early 20s used to come in and ask me about records a lot, and one day in a conversation he let a weird detail about my life slip that I hadn't told him. My dad is not American. I brushed it off, thinking my coworkers has not mentioned it to him since he was such a regular. About a week later, I was driving home and my car broke down. It was incredibly hot and I had to walk several miles to get to a payphone, which was outside an elementary school. I called the cab and hung up the phone, and after sitting a moment, and it started ringing, so I picked it up. The person on the other end said, "Bad luck about your car. Talk, car, talk to me until your ride gets there." I hung up the phone, but it was definitely that guy. He had to have followed me from home, trailed me from the car, called the school to ask for the payphone number, and found a way to call me. At that number, there weren't really cell phones at that time, but there was a gas station and a grocery store across the street, so who knows? I immediately quit my job and moved back in with my parents within 48 hours. I went in to visit old friends from work a few months later. They told me the guy was arrested for kidnapping. Oh my, that is. Oh, you want to hear a super duper long one?
No. I think I'm gonna go to bed.
Okay, bye, Ford. You're gonna find a cave and I'm in it because I am king of mobs and there is a lot of mobs in me. Two in chat, the perfect thing to fall asleep to. That's what someone commented. Bye, Ford.